After about 10 times, when they really nailed a target that was in a sealed envelope, absolutely no way that they could have known it, because it's just totally picked them random out of hundreds of targets. And they nail it, they describe it, they draw it, and then we open the envelope and they look at it, and about the 10th time that happens, it's, oh, what Lori's husband calls it. And from that point on, I know I'm going to have a good viewer. From that point on, we're going to be bringing home some missing kids, you know, missing soldiers. Yeah.
Chris Lado, welcome to Lado Files. Welcome to the channel. Thank you for being here. That was Lynn Buchanan with Jeffrey Mishlove on New Thinking Aloud. Lynn Buchanan says that he's been using controlled remote viewing, basically psychic technique, a method, training other people to do skills such as find missing children and find missing military members. Could this be possible? Before 2 years ago, when I actually started looking into paranormal events through this YouTube channel, I honestly never considered that psychic phenomena or any of that could even be possible. Did you know the CIA and the US government has been using some form of remote viewing for decades, many decades? Did you know that the US Congress back in 1994 directed the CIA to actually investigate remote viewing to see if controlled remote viewing or remote viewing would be useful, and should they continue, and that is continue to use remote viewing in their intelligence activities? So today I'll go over this evaluation and study, very well done study. It's over 180 pages. I read through all of it and highlighted the interesting points. This study seems to have a good balance between the pro argument and the skeptical argument. And this study found some very interesting things. It really did. Man, I think in many ways it proves that there is an anomaly, but can it be used for intelligence activities? Okay, so this is the report on evaluation of the remote viewing program, research and operational applications. This is from 2002, but man, still has amazing information in it. Prepared by the American Institutes for Research, September 22nd, 1995, and we'll go into a little more detail on how it actually came about. Okay, executive summary. Despite the controversy concerning the nature of paranormal phenomena, many individuals and organizations continue to be avidly interested in these phenomena. The intelligence community is no exception. Beginning in the 1970s, it has conducted a program intended to investigate the application of one paranormal phenomenon, remote viewing, or the ability to describe locations one has not visited. And he says there, with any prior knowledge. Obviously, this would be an amazing intelligence capability, right? If you can just sit in your basement and now using these techniques, this controlled remote viewing techniques, could you actually get actionable intelligence? That was what they were looking for, actionable intelligence. The part of the program review conducted by the American Institutes for Research, a nonprofit private research organization, consisted of two main components. The first component was a review of the research program. The second component was a review of the operational application. So does it exist? Is there an actual remote viewing opportunity? And then can we actually use it for operational intelligence against enemy? Of course. What was well done in this is they had a pro doctor and they had a skeptical doctor. So to evaluate the research program, a blue ribbon panel was assembled. The panel included two noted experts, Dr. Jessica Utz, a professor of statistics at the University of California, Davis, and Dr. Raymond Hyman, a professor of psychology at the University of Oregon. Dr. Utz published articles on paranormal interpretations positively, while Dr. Hyman was selected to present a more skeptical position. So in addition, you also had Dr. Lincoln Moses, an emeritus professor at Stanford University, for statistical advice, and Dr. David Gosselin, president of AIR, served as coordinator for the research effort. Panel members were asked to review all laboratory experiments and meta-analytic reviews conducted as part of the research program, approximately 80 separate publications, which had a summary of multiple experiments. In a typical remote viewing experiment in the lab, a remote viewer is asked to visualize a place, a location, or object being viewed by a beacon or a sender. So this came out is, do you even need a sender to actually send the information? They found that the sender isn't really even required. You don't even need a sender, right, to send the information. But that's what they used for the initial experiments. In most recent laboratory experiments reviewed for the present evaluation, National Geographic photographs provided the target pool. This is similar to the experiments that Lynn Buchanan was talking about. They had hundreds of National Geographic photos in envelopes, so sealed envelopes. And then the actual remote viewers would try to determine which envelope are they going to pick, what's in the envelope. Okay, and this is really the background of how it happened. So in 1995, the CIA declassified its past parapsychology program efforts in order to facilitate a new external review. In addition, CIA worked with DIA to continue declassification of Stargate program documents. In June of 1995, CIA's Office of Research and Development then contracted with AIR for this external review based on our long-standing expertise in carrying out studies relating to behavioral science issues and our neutrality with respect to the subject matter. The CIA asked AIR to address a number of key objectives during the technical review of Stargate. These included a comprehensive evaluation of the research and development in this area, with a focus on the validity of the technical approaches according to acceptable scientific standards, and an evaluation of overall program utility or usefulness to the government. So does it work, and can we use it? They also wanted AIR to develop recommendations for the CIA as to appropriate strategies for program activity in the future. So should they continue the Stargate program? 3 basic sources of information were used in evaluation of the intelligence gathering component: prior research studies, interviews with program participants, so everyone involved, and the analysis of the user feedback, people getting the actual remote viewing documents, the intel. So the research program they're looking after is the government-sponsored research program that had 3 broad objectives. I'm assuming this is Stargate. The first and primary objective was to provide scientifically compelling evidence for the existence of remote viewing phenomenon. So does it exist? Unambiguous evidence. The second objective was to identify causal mechanisms that might account for or explain the observed phenomenon. So what is causing the phenomenon? Is it actually paranormal? The third objective of the research program was to identify techniques or procedures that might enhance the utility of the information provided by remote viewings. Can we get better information from it? Because they are getting information. The NRC provided a thorough review of the unclassified remote viewing research through 1986. So they had their review panel. The first of these 2 expert reviewers, Dr. Jessica Utz, a professor of statistics at the University of California, Davis, is a nationally recognized scholar who has made major contributions to the development and application of new statistical methods and techniques. So she's a statistician. The second expert reviewer, Dr. Raymond Hyman, is a professor of psychology at the University of Oregon. Dr. Hyman has published over 200 articles in professional journals on perception, pattern recognition, creativity, problem solving, and critiques of the paranormal. In addition to these 2 experts, 4 other scientists were involved. 2 senior behavioral scientists and experts in research methods at AIR, Dr. Michael Mumford and Dr. Andrew Rose. Both served as members of and staff to the panel. So their general evaluation procedures were to look at 3 basic sources of information were used in evaluation of the intelligence gathering component: prior research studies, interviews with program participants, and analysis of user feedback. This is who they interviewed, basically end users, representatives from agencies requesting information from remote viewers, the program manager, and the remote viewers themselves. A retired CIA intelligence officer took notes during the interviews. A representative of the CIA attended interviews as necessary to describe the reasons the interviews were being conducted and to address any security concerns. A total of 12 to 16 questions were asked in the interviews. From Dr. Utz, an assessment of the evidence for psychic functioning. Research on psychic functioning conducted over a 2-decade period is examined to determine whether or not the phenomenon has been scientifically established. A secondary question is whether or not it is useful for government purposes. Using the standards applied to any other area of science, it is concluded that psychic functioning has been well established. The statistical results of the studies examined are far beyond what is expected by chance. Arguments that these results could be due to methodological flaws in the experiments are soundly refuted. Effects of similar magnitude to those found in government-sponsored research at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and SAIC have been replicated at a number of laboratories across the world. Such consistency cannot be readily explained by claims of flaws or fraud. The magnitude of psychic functioning appears to be small to medium effect. That means it is reliable enough to be replicated in properly conducted experiments with sufficient trials to achieve the long-run statistical results needed for replicability. That means that Dr. Utz is saying is, and she's a statistician, remember that, statistically, it is overwhelming. The evidence is overwhelming in these experiments. Now, you can argue that the original experiments at SRI had some methodological flaws, but as we'll see, the later experiments at SAIC fixed these flaws. A number of other patterns have been found. For instance, it doesn't appear that a sender is needed. Precognition, in which the answer is known to no one until a future time, appears to work quite well. Recent experiments suggest that if there is a psychic sense, then it works much like our other 5 senses by detecting change. This was an interesting concept for me, is how do we actually detect change with our senses? I learned from this paper, if you think about it, it is change in state. It is a change in state. That's all it is. So a change from now into the future state. So what Dr. Utz is suggesting is that precognition could be some sort of ability to sense a change in this future state. So a change in state. It's recommended that future experiments focus on understanding how this phenomena works and on how to make it as useful as possible. There's little benefit to continuing experiments designed to offer proof, since there is little more to be offered to anyone who does not accept the current collection of data. Amazing. Interesting there. So she says it is overwhelmingly proven true that there is an anomaly, but we need to figure out why it's happening. That should be what future experiments focus on. So Dr. Utz, who is a statistician, says there is no need to do further experiments on proving that there is an anomaly, that psychic functioning does in fact exist. She says the evidence is overwhelming. I mean, amazing. The problem is the effects are very, very small. They're small to a medium effect, meaning you have to have perfect experimental conditions, and you need to do many, many, many runs, often thousands of runs, to determine an actual statistical variance. That's what she's saying, though, is that this has been found. Here's where she gives more evidence. There are a few examples of applied non-laboratory remote viewings provided to the review team that would seem to meet that criterion for evidence, basically, that can't be ignored. 2 such examples are given by Ed May, in which it appears that the results were so striking that they far exceed the phenomenon as observed in the laboratory. Using a post hoc analysis, Dr. May concluded that in one of these cases, the remote viewer was able to describe a microwave generator with 80% accuracy, and that of what he said, almost 70% of it was reliable. Laboratory remote viewings rarely show that level of correspondence. The viewer described the microwave generator allegedly knew only that the target was a technical site in the United States, yet he drew and described the microwave generator, including its function, its approximate size, how it was housed, and that it had a beam divergence angle of 30 degrees. This reminds me of a discussion I had with John Ramirez. John Ramirez was a CIA radar analyst. And in an interview I did with him, John Ramirez stated that he received remote viewing intelligence. One time in his career, he actually received remote viewing intelligence of a radar site in Russia. It was actually the transmitter, the design and shape of the transmitter at this site was new and novel. And John Ramirez received intel, the drawing of that actual transmitter, before the information was disclosed openly on the internet. And then later on, John actually talked to the person, and then got confirmation that it was him randomly that gave this remote viewing information on this radar site. I mean, just amazing stuff. And this is Dr. Utz's belief why more people don't believe in the psychic evidence. This is undoubtedly the reason many people think the reality of psychic functioning is a matter of belief rather than science. since they are more familiar with the provocative anecdotes than with the laboratory evidence. The SRI era, so Standard Research Institute, early operational successes, according to Puthoff and Targ, the scientific research endeavor at SRI may have never been supported had it not been for 3 apparent operational successes in the early days of the program. This is quite interesting. One of the apparent successes concerned the West Virginia site in which 2 remote viewers purportedly identified an underground secret facility. One of them apparently named code words and personnel in this facility accurately enough that it set off a security investigation to determine how that information could have been leaked. The same viewer then claimed that he could describe a similar communist bloc site and proceed to do so for a site in the Urals. According to Puthoff and Targ, the 2 reports for the West Virginia site and the report for the Ural site were verified by personnel in the sponsor organization as being substantially correct. I mean, that is amazing. The 3rd reported operational success concerned an accurate description of a large crane and other information at a site in Semipalatinsk, USSR. Again, the viewer was provided with only the geographic coordinates of the site and was asked to describe what was there. So there are successes. There is reason why the government did this for many decades, right? And is there more reason than we suspect? Is it because they actually know and have a deeper background with the UAPs, with the phenomena? Is that why they're interested, the CIA? So the SRI experiments, 1973 to 1988, Targ and Puthoff, according to Utz, the statistical results were so overwhelming that results that extreme or more so would occur only about once in every 1,020 such instances if chance alone is the explanation. Obviously, some explanation other than chance must be found. Psychic functioning may not be the only possibility. However, the fact that the same level of functioning continued to hold in the later experiments, which did not contain those flaws, lends to support the idea that the methodological problems cannot account for the results. Utz is referencing SAIC experiments. That was the follow-on experiments to SRI. SAIC is Science Applications International Corporation. They were guided by a scientific oversight committee consisting of experts in various disciplines, including a winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics, internationally known professors of statistics, psychology, neuroscience, and astronomy, and a medical doctor who is a retired U.S. Army Major General. And they have full access, the full set of SAIC experiments, and they had Ed May there to actually talk to them. In a memorandum dated July 25th, 1995, Dr. Edwin May listed the set of experiments conducted by SAIC. There were 10 experiments, all designed to answer questions about psychic functioning raised by the work at SRI and other laboratories, rather than just to provide additional proof of its existence. So these are the experiments that the methodological value was improved. So the SRI experiments, they had some methodological flaws, right? When scientists went back to look, as we'll see, the skeptical arguer Ray Hyman says that there were methodological flaws in the earlier, but it was actually improved in these SAIC experiments. So the earlier flaws in the science experiments were holed up. They plugged the holes, and what they found they had the same results. The SAIC experiments brought up some other questions, right? Free response remote viewing, in which subjects describe a target, was much more successful than forced choice experiments, in which subjects were asked to choose from a small set of possibilities. So free response, but then is it accurate? There was a group of 6 selected individuals whose performance far exceeded that of unselected subjects. Mass screening efforts found that about 1% of those who volunteered to be tested were consistently successful at remote viewing. This indicates that remote viewing is an ability that differs across individuals. Neither practice nor a variety of training techniques consistently work to improve remote viewing. It appears that it is easier to find than to train good remote viewers. I mean, it's like Star Wars. I mean, 1% are okay, but is there like 0.0001% of the population that are amazing? They have a midichlorian count, way above everyone else. It is not clear whether or not feedback showing the subject the right answer is necessary, but it does appear to provide a psychological boost. Okay. Distance between the target and the subject does not seem to impact the quality of the remote viewing. So distance doesn't matter. This is interesting. Electromagnetic shielding does not appear to inhibit performance of remote viewing. So it goes right through electromagnetic shielding. Quite interesting. That would get through all your Faraday cages, etc. There is compelling evidence that precognition, in which the target is selected after the subject has given the description, is also successful. This was interesting too. Like, it knows in the future what you're going to pick. They can know. There is no evidence to support anomalous perturbation, i.e., physical interaction with the environment by psychic means. That means if you're talking about these sort of effects, then you have to rule out other types of psychic interactions, such as psychokinesis, which is physical interaction with the environment by psychic means. The results of the overall SRI analysis are consistent with the results of similar experiments in other laboratories at the time. So even though their methodological flaws supposedly existed, there was 4 other labs in the area that did get the same results. So you had the psychophysical research laboratories in Princeton, and they did similar things. Consistent results across laboratories help refute the idea that the successful experiments in any one lab are a result of fraud or sloppy protocols. This is my favorite experiment. Experiment 7, described in Appendix 2, remote staring. This is to test claims made in the former Soviet Union by some researchers in the US that individuals could influence the physiology of another individual from a remote location. Both replications were successful from a traditional statistical perspective. It's interesting. In other words, it appeared that the physiology of one individual was activated when he or she was being watched by someone in a distant room. If the results are indeed sound, then they may substantiate the folklore, indicating that people know when they are being observed from behind. This would test if you know that you're being watched. They put basically the remote viewer in one room with a camera on that person, and then another room, they put another person, and they would turn on the camera feed, live or not, and then try and detect if there was any noticeable differences. And according to this study, statistical differences did exist. And then her final nail in the coffin is the Gansfield results from 4 different laboratories. The Gansfield results is basically the same thing. You're testing their ability to determine a number. So they shouldn't be able to do it out by chance. This was done by Bem and Honorton in 1994. They found that the remaining studies showed 106 out of 329 sessions for a hit rate 32.2%, when 25% is expected by chance. This result has now been replicated by 3 additional laboratories. So they had 3 additional laboratories up to 37%, 33%, 33%. So based on this, conclusions about external replication, the results shown in Table 3 show that remote viewing has been conceptually replicated across a number of laboratories by various experimenters and in different cultures. This is a robust effect, were it not in such an unusual domain, would no longer be questioned by science as a real phenomenon. Look at that. Amazing point here. Utz is saying that it has been proven there is a statistical anomaly related to these remote viewing experiments, and they've done it over many years and tried to rule out all of your methodological flaws. So she says it's a definite, guaranteed. We should stop looking into does it exist and look into how to use it and how to understand why it exists. What are the actual methods that it's using? Okay, this is that experiment 7, remote observation. I'll just leave it up here if you want to read about it. But basically, that was Utz's main paper with all our supporting documentation, is that remote viewing has definitely been proven scientifically. There is an anomaly there, but we don't understand anything really more than this. There are some kind of key points that she mentioned, but it sounds like that's what she thinks we need to focus on. But it's a given that it works. As far as is it valuable for intelligence activities? Now let's go to the skeptical argument. This is the evaluation of program on anomalous mental phenomena by Ray Hyman. He states here, with him and Utz, we both agree that the SAIC experiments were free of the methodological weaknesses that plagued the early SRI research. We also agree that the SAIC experiments appear to be free of the more obvious and better known flaws that can invalidate the results of parapsychological investigations. We agree that the effect sizes reported in the SAIC experiments are too large and consistent to be dismissed as statistical flukes. So he says, we agree on all this stuff. Okay, there is an anomaly, but what do they disagree on? Do these apparently non-chance effects justify concluding that the existence of anomalous cognition has been established? He says no. So there is an anomaly there, but he says there's no way you can positively identify that it is from psychic effects. Second, has the possibility of methodological flaws been completely eliminated? This seems like you can always say that there is always a methodological flaw. But in this case, he does seem to think that they were removed, right? Didn't you just say that? Are the SAIC results consistent with the contemporary findings in other parapsychological laboratories on remote viewing and the Gansfield phenomenon? The remainder of this report will try to justify why I believe the answer to these three questions is no. So he doesn't believe it. He says that there is an effect, that there is a statistical effect. He agrees with Dr. Utz, but there's no positive method to determine what it is from. It could be from anything. It's so small, it needs to be taken into account over so many statistical experiments, right? You have to take so many experiments, and the effect is so small that there's no way we can say that it is from psychic or paranormal activity, right? There's no positive theory, he says. All they've been done so far in these studies is ruled out all of the mundane ideas, but we've never proven a positive theory towards paranormal. That's basically what I can tell is this whole argument. I do not believe that the contemporary findings of parapsychology, including those from the SRI SAIC program, justify concluding that anomalous mental phenomena have been proven. Professor Utz and some parapsychologists believe otherwise. I admit that the latest findings should make them optimistic. The case for psychic functioning seems better than it has ever been, and yet we still don't believe. The contemporary findings, along with the output of SAIC program, do seem to indicate that something beyond odd statistical hiccups is taking place. I also have to admit that I do not have a ready explanation for these observed effects. Inexplicable statistical departures from chance, however, are a far cry from compelling evidence from anomalous cognition. So that is his main argument, is that yes, there is something there. There is a statistical anomaly in these experiments, but that doesn't mean that paranormal, psychic, remote viewing, controlled remote viewing has been proven. Something is occurring for which we have no obvious or ready explanation. This something may or may not turn out to be paranormal. According to Palmer, parapsychologists will have to devise a positive theory of the paranormal before they will be in a position to claim that the observed anomalies indicate paranormal functioning. Ed May, in his presentation to the evaluation panel, said, in his opinion, approximately 20% of the information supplied by a viewer is accurate. Unfortunately, at the time the remote viewer is generating the information, we have no way of deciding which portion is likely to be the accurate one. Another problem is that the viewer's information could be accurate, yet not relevant for the intelligence analyst's purposes. So this is getting into, is it operationally useful? Is it operationally effective? And that is questionable. I tend to agree with Professor Utz that real effects are occurring in these experiments. Something other than chance departures from the null hypothesis has occurred in these experiments. However, the occurrence of statistical effects does not warrant the conclusion that psychic function has been demonstrated. The challenge to parapsychology, if it hopes to convincingly claim the discovery of anomalous cognition, is to go beyond the demonstration of significant effects. The parapsychologists need to achieve the ability to specify conditions under which one can reliably witness their alleged phenomena. So this is his argument, is they need to actually prove it better, I guess, with an exemplar case. Dr. Hyman says that there's no single case that can even show a positive example of CRV. Utz comes back and says it actually is the Gansfeld experiments. They are an exemplar that now you could go and replicate, because it needs to be replicatable, right? But now anyone can go and replicate those Gansfeld experiments and could potentially see for themselves that there is an effect and try to figure out what the cause is. This is Hyman's claim here. Parapsychology is the only field of scientific inquiry that does not have even one exemplar that can be assigned to students with the expectation that they will observe the original results, meaning parapsychology cannot be replicated. And I think the argument is it can, it's just difficult. What differentiates these phenomena from simple experiments like splitting light with a prism is that the effects are statistical in nature and are not expected to occur every single time. So this is really the main argument. Not everyone who smokes gets lung cancer, but we can predict the proportion who will. Not everyone who attempts anomalous cognition will be successful, but I think we can predict the proportion of time successes should be achieved. This is made worse by the fact that it appears it's not a skill that you can fully learn. You can learn it, but up to your level. Okay, so it seems like everyone's maybe born with an innate talent. Okay, so this would mean only 1% of the population is what they found could even do the remote viewing experiments. What if you have like super remote viewers, right? Super, super remote viewers who have this amazing sense that can now do it much, much better than other people. It's like same as UAPs. They're so rare, right? The UFO events are actually so rare, it's very hard to determine, to get actual experimental data on them, to get evidence. Since I believe the probability of success has been established in the Otto Gansfeld experiments, I would offer them as the exemplar Professor Hyman requests. The problem is that to be relatively assured of a successful outcome requires several hundred trials, and no student has the resources to commit to this experiment. As I have repeatedly tried to explain to Professor Hyman and others, when dealing with a small to medium effect, it takes hundreds or sometimes thousands of trials to establish statistical significance. This means it is difficult, right? It takes a lot of hard work, effort. You have to have your methodological tools down like pat. It's got to be totally solid. And then it takes many hundreds or thousands of runs. It takes a lot of finance, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money. So if you don't believe it's even in the realm of possibility, then these science experiments are not going to be undertaken. So that's why you won't get any more further experiments. And she believes the parapsychologists such as Dean Radin and others who have recently been willing to take on this challenge have indeed found success in their experiments, as described in my original report. Now let's go to the final conclusions. What did they decide, and is it operationally effective to continue to use remote viewing in intelligence operations? Let's see. So, conclusions. The first question presented to the reviewers was whether the evidence indicated the presence of a statistically significant effect. The reviewers agreed that, considered broadly, statistically significant effects have been obtained in these studies. I mean, look at that. It appears that viewers' descriptions produce hits more frequently than would be expected by chance. And it also appears that it depends on the person. The second question presented to the reviewers considers the nature of these effects. The question to be answered is whether the effects could be attributed to paranormal phenomena. In this regard, the viewers disagreed. Dr. Utz argued positively and Dr. Hyman negatively. Our conclusion from the discussions is that direct evidence has not been provided, indicating that this paranormal ability of the remote viewers is the source of these effects. So no direct evidence. All we have is statistical evidence. I don't know how you would get direct evidence. The third question presented to the panel asked whether we have obtained an adequate understanding of the phenomenon. Do we know how the ability, if it exists, works? Here it's clear that the present research program has failed to identify mechanisms explaining the source of these effects, so they have no idea how it could even work. The fourth and final question presented to the reviewers was whether the research provides support for intelligence gathering operations. Here, the magnitude of the observed effects, their consistency and replicability, and the need for subjective interpretation all seem to argue against potential applications. Taken as a whole, here's the final conclusions. The laboratory research conducted as part of the present program has identified a statistically significant anomaly. However, the experiments have not provided a convincing demonstration that a paranormal ability is involved. We don't know it's paranormal. We have no idea how it's working, but can't prove it's paranormal. The research studies have not identified the nature and source of the effect. There is no evidence that the phenomenon would prove useful in intelligence gathering. I mean, no evidence. I tend to disagree from the user interviews I read through here. They did have some evidence. Okay, so this is from the reviewers, that there would be no usefulness, right? But then they actually asked the people in the program. Okay, so after all their interviews, all those people I mentioned at the beginning, the information provided by viewings is vague and general in nature. Okay, so that's kind of a problem. Is not consistent across independent viewings, lacks specific content consistent with known facts of the case, and includes a large amount of irrelevant, often erroneous information. So it sounds like there is some accurate information in there, but it's filled with so much disinformation that they can't really use it. The lack of specifics apparent in the viewings may well be an intrinsic characteristic of the process, a point noted by the remote viewers. The remote viewers saying, look, you can't get the specifics. That's not what remote viewing can give you. Nonetheless, this vagueness and the limited agreement evident in viewers' reports make it impossible to apply this information in decision-making. One potential strategy for addressing this issue would be to seek more specific information in viewings. However, existing laboratory research provides little support for the likely success of this approach. So they can't get more specific information based on what the actual remote viewers believe about the process. The fact that the information being provided is too vague and unreliable to permit operational application suggests that the viewing program is of limited value to the intelligence community. And that's what I understood is it's of limited value, right? No one said we should throw it away, but they said they weren't going to pay for it, all the users. This is from the actual users. A third source of evidence used to evaluate operational utility consists of analysis of user feedback. This information was collected by a representative of the U.S. government in the spring and summer of '95. The results have been included in the report, Appendix D. The program office asked each user submitting tasks to evaluate the accuracy and value of the viewings. Evaluations were available for 40 viewings obtained in 94 and 95. It's rated on a scale 1 to 5. The average accuracy rating was 3.0 across viewers and tasks, indicating that there might possibly be some accurate information provided. The average value rating was 3.5 out of 5, indicating that the information was of low relative value. So the value rating wasn't that good, but there was some accuracy. This pattern of results is consistent with the interviewed findings. Remote viewings were better at capturing broad background information rather than the concrete, specific information needed for intelligence operations. So maybe not for intelligence operations that they need, but there were two organizations, one concerned with tracking people and one concerned with combat intelligence, indicated that the information provided was of substantially greater accuracy and value than was reported by the other user organizations. However, the viewers had substantial general background information. So we go back to the beginning with Lynn Buchanan. When he mentioned, we'll be out there, we're going to find missing kids. Well, could that be possible based on this study, based on user inputs from units that are actually concerned with tracking people? It was valuable. And they said much more valuable, actually. So could it be used by people like Lynn Buchanan? Could we be using this to find missing kids, to find interesting information that we couldn't find any other way? So these are the conclusions. The findings obtained this evaluation of the intelligence applications of remote viewing leads us to the conclusion that remote viewing, as used in the present program, has limited value for the intelligence community as an information gathering technique. So it has some value, right? Remote viewing has some value is what they determined, but limited. The basic considerations that lead us to this conclusion are conditions under which significant effects are observed in experimental laboratory research are, for the most part, unlikely to occur in intelligence operations. So they do see significant effects in laboratory environments. Not only will feedback be unavailable, but the target pool will typically be unconstrained. And information provided by the remote viewing technique tends to be vague and ambiguous, and it appears difficult, if not impossible, to consistently obtain accurate information from the remote viewers across a range of targets. So they can't get accurate enough information. But based off of all these studies, based off of everything, they find that there is limited. A statistically significant effect has been observed in the recent laboratory experiments of remote viewing. The experimental research conducted as part of the current program does not unambiguously support the interpretation of the results in terms of paranormal phenomena. So they don't know. They can't say it's paranormal. They don't know what it is, but there is something there. Adequate experimental and theoretical evidence for the existence of remote viewing as a parapsychological phenomenon has not been provided by the research component of the current program. A significant change in focus and methods would be necessary to justify additional laboratory research within the current program. With that being said, remote viewing, as exemplified by the efforts in this current program, has not been shown to have value in intelligence operations. Continued support for the operational component of the current program is not justified. So that's what they believed. So that's the final report, man. It was mind-blowing. I read that whole thing just in one sitting, took several hours. Amazing stuff there, but they have looked into it. The government has looked into this CIA Stargate program, many decades. You have SRI, SAIC. They have done the research, and they can replicate whatever this effect is in a laboratory environment. There are statistical proof, statistical evidence that some other sense, some other mental sense exists, right? It does exist, but they can't use it for evil, essentially. They can't use it for actionable intelligence, right? But maybe there are civilian equivalents, or maybe we can use it for good. Maybe they're just not using it in the right instances. That's what the remote viewers are saying. Finally, UAP Society, the organization I started, has a UAP video challenge. You can go to our Discord to get more information. The basic idea is to present in a video form what is your idea to get tangible UAP evidence. Is it a camera system? Is it an idea for an app? Can you build some sort of intercommunication device using Tesla coils? What is your idea? If you have an idea for UAPs to try and track down, get more evidence for the phenomenon, then this is your chance. All you have to do is put your idea into a video. It could just be you talking, okay, with a PowerPoint presentation. The actual quality of the video doesn't matter. It is the idea. Can we execute the plan? Can we go fund it? Can we use it? And we will. If you post that video, put UAP DSci as a hashtag in the title, and then have that up by the end of November, you will have a chance to win $1,000. Pick one winner of $1,000 and one second winner of $500. And the point is to get a bunch of videos and ideas out there about how we can get more evidence for the phenomenon. Hope you guys can get excited about this. I certainly am. And why not? Get your idea out there. Put your mouth where your money is and maybe get some money back and win $1,000 or $500 second place. So thank you so much for watching this. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Please hit the like button. It really does help the video. And then subscribe. You can get future notifications of when I release my videos. And then please consider supporting the channel, and you get additional benefit, exclusive videos on patreon.com/Chris Lato. If just 1 in 100 of you supported, that would be more than enough to support my channel going into the future. So thank you so much for considering. Have a great day. Peace.